Hi. So I am Jody Moen, and I am an associate counselor at UW-Platteville at University Health Services. And I am happy to be introducing Dr. Sarah Fox today. Her presentation is called Chronic Stress and Burnout, Break the Cycle. I'm just going to take a couple seconds here to introduce Dr. Fox. She is a family medicine physician in Mineral Point and Dodgeville and cares for people across all stages of life. She attended UW-Madison for undergraduate work, medical school, and residency, and in 2009 she moved with her husband and 3 children to Mineral Point to practice family medicine. In addition to her clinical practice, she also serves as the medical director for the Upland Hills Health 7 primary care clinics. For the last year, she has served as the medical advisor to the Upland Hills Health COVID response team. She is passionate about wellness and aims to help her patients understand the connection between lifestyle, stress, and physical health. So thank you, Dr. Fox, for leading us through this presentation. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Dr. Fox.
Okay, sounds good. I am, learning the technology, so if there's any problems with what you can see or have any issues with anything, just let me know. And I will try to keep my eye on the chat. If there are questions or anything that come up as I go, please just throw them into the chat, or if Jody wants to interrupt me if there's anybody that has a question that would help to guide the discussion a little bit. So we have a pretty small group, so hopefully we can have a good conversation here. So the goal of this talk is really to talk about how we can, in the setting of chronic stress and burnout, figure out ways to kind of take control so that it's not leading to physical health problems, because we are in a society where chronic stress is common. Burnout, unfortunately, is common. And so when we find ourselves in those situations where chronic stress and burnout are an issue, how can we take control either of the situation or about our response to the situation so that we are not seeing health consequences as a result? So as Jody mentioned, I am a family medicine physician. I do OB care as well. So I do full spectrum family medicine and deliver babies and all of that. I wear many hats, and some people may know me from different hats that I've worn over the years, including writing a children's cookbook and my 3 kids that are in Mineral Point schools right now. I also, this list helps to remind me to mention that I am a chronic over volunteer. So I tend to raise my hand or step up if people have, a need for somebody to serve. I tend to be the one that will, I have to sometimes sit on my hands to not say yes to things. So as a result, that ends up leading to a situation where I tend to be sometimes pulled in a little too many directions and have to re-examine things and figure out if my stress level is a healthy stress level or not. So I'm going to start with just what is chronic stress. So it technically, the technical definition is that it's the response to emotional pressure suffered for a prolonged period of time in which an individual feels they have little or no control. So it's the chronic stress part of it is usually there's an external situation. There's a time period that you're in that external situation and you just don't have control over what that situation is. When we are in that chronic stress mode, it is also by definition that the stress hormones or chemicals that usually respond to acute stress are activated in chronic stress, but instead of having that acute stress situation, which goes away over a short period of time, is present for a longer period of time. And that response that is very helpful in acute stress can damage tissue over time and cause disease. So The reason our bodies respond this way is because with evolution, we weren't exposed to chronic stress very regularly. We were exposed to acute stress very frequently. And acute stress, the example is a lion is chasing you. A lion is chasing you. That's an acutely stressful situation, and your body is designed to escape from the lion and to seek safety. And so once that lion is not chasing you anymore, then your body knows how to calm back down and get back into your normal status where you're not feeling like a lion's chasing you at all times. And unfortunately, with our current, society and the pressures that we have in our lives, we feel like the lion's chasing us, even though there's nothing there. So our bodies think a lion is chasing you. You have to escape. You have to protect yourself. You have to seek safety. And it never actually gets that break because you never can escape the lion, because it's just this kind of nebulous thing that your body doesn't really understand. So the acute stress reaction, in response to acute stress, your body prepares to fight or flee. So this is the thing that people, I think, understand pretty well. You are, in a situation where you have to seek safety, and your body knows how to do that. So your blood pressure goes up and your heart rate go up, and that is to send more blood flow to your muscles so that you can either have the strength to fight whatever is chasing you or to run away. Your cortisol levels increase, and cortisol is a hormone in your body that releases extra blood sugar when your body needs more fuel. And so as a result of that cortisol level increase, your blood sugar levels will increase, and your body prepares for repairing damage. So it expects that, maybe you would get injured with this stress that's chasing you. And so it increases inflammatory markers that are ready to repair tissue damage when it happens. And then your thinking is hyper-focused on the threat or stress. You kind of tune out everything around you because all you need to focus on is how you can get to safety. So that acute stress reaction, after you fight or you flee, the threat is removed. So say you are out in the, let's say out in the forest, and a lion chases you, and you run away and you run back to your village where your friends and family are there, and the lion decides that you're not worth it, so they walk away, and you're with your friends and family again, and you all feel that safety and security, and you have the sigh of relief that that threat is gone, and all of those effects that are up here, the blood pressure, the heart rate, the cortisol level, blood sugar, the inflammatory markers, and thinking, go back to normal, go back to what you had before you had that stressful situation happen. So the chronic stress reaction, the body senses a stress, but, and the acute stress response is generated, which is great for that short-term response, but we cannot fight or flee because there's not something tangible that we're actually able to get away from. The threat is not removed, it's constantly there, and we may not feel safety or security again because we kind of are constantly having that threat be in the background. So that acute response becomes a chronic response, and your body has no idea that it's not fleeing a lion when it's stressed about going into work in the morning. So it's really just the exact same response. It's just sustained over a long period of time. So blood pressure and heart rate stay elevated. So you might come in for a checkup at the doctor or go to give blood, and your blood pressure is high. Or you are noticing that you're eating exactly the same and you're exercising, all of a sudden you're gaining weight for no reason. That's a cortisol response. Or your blood sugar might be elevated when you go in for your physical. Or your joints are achy and you're tired all the time and you just don't feel good. That might be that increased inflammation. And then feeling distracted, or not feeling like you can focus on the good things in life or just the rest of life in general, feeling like you're forgetting about appointments or misplacing things or things like that. That's your thinking being hyper-focused on the threat that's there. So there's some examples of acute stress responses where that response is expected and should go back down to normal is, for example, if you have to give a presentation at work and it's maybe a high pressure situation and you're wanting to make sure you impress your boss, your heart rate might rise, you might feel kind of shaky or jittery, you might feel kind of a little amped up. That is your body's acute stress response. And then hopefully the presentation goes well and your body goes back down to normal afterwards. If your child gets injured, you're at the park and they fall and injure their wrist, you will be hyper focused on getting your child to safety and might feel like your heart's racing when you say get to the emergency room to have their x-ray taken. But after a little while, once you're there, once you're safe and you kind of know what the situation is for your child, then everything goes back down to normal. Or a driver cuts you off in traffic and you blast your horn and you get, angry or upset, and then they drive off and you hopefully go back down to normal if there's no more drivers cutting you off. So the chronic stress response example, one might be that you go to work and you always have a stack of tasks. I find this, I come in on Monday mornings and there's a stack of paperwork and it just feels like it is a never ending stack sometimes. So your body feels like there's something that needs to be done and I'm trying to get it done and it never goes away. Or if you have a child with a chronic health problem that leads to more frequent hospital visits. So that's sort of that feeling of like, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's it going to be that we have to go into the ER suddenly or things like that? Your body is prepared for this acute stress response at all times, and it leads to that chronic stress response. And then another example would be if you have a coworker who is uncivil or disrespectful, or you just really don't get along with them to the point that you can't even stand to be around them. The thought of going into work and having to work with that person, or fearing getting an email from them or things like that that are going to set you off, leads to this more chronic stress response, because again, it's not like they drive off and you never see them again. They're going to be there. You can't escape that. So then chronic stress, in some cases, people will be in a chronically stressful situation for quite some time. It doesn't always lead to burnout, but can lead to burnout. And so burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. So it typically is an extended period of stress that feels as though it cannot be fixed. So it's the kind of thing where people say, I just don't see that this is ever going to get better. I'm overwhelmed. I don't think nobody can help me because there's no help for this situation. This is the way it's going to be forever. And they feel this sense of dread about going to work, feelings of cynicism. So sometimes people start to get, in the patient care world, we think of doctors that are starting to be rude or cynical to patients. They're angry with their coworkers. They're irritable. Those are all key signs of burnout. So when we kind of have set up that situation, it's helpful to ask, okay, is this impossible to fix, and do we just have to live through it, or can we break that cycle? So a couple of questions that I like to ask when people are in this kind of situation is, and I see patients with this and coworkers with chronic stress and sometimes burnout very, very frequently. So this is a very common thing that people will come to the doctor about, or will present to me as either my coworkers, my colleagues, or employees of the clinics that I help to manage. So can the situation be changed? So, if somebody has a chronically stressful situation related to working in an office that's far away from where they live, and so they have a long commute, can that situation be changed? Can they be moved to a different office? Can they move where their house is? Can they change their hours to make it a little bit less traffic? Is that situation changeable? The second thing is, can you limit the time you're exposed to the situation? So if, on that same example, if they're going to a work location that they have that coworker that they're really having conflict with, and they're going there 4 days a week? Can we limit that to 2 days a week? Or can we say, okay, just get through March and then we'll be able to change it in April? Or can you stagger your hours so that you're not overlapping with that person? So can you limit that time that you're exposed? And then finally, can you take back control of any piece of the stressful situation? So this might be, can you, it's similar to, changing hours, things like that, but also, are there boundaries that we can put in? Are there any kind of remediation things that the leadership can help with? Or are there certain civility rules or hours restrictions or things like that that would help with that overall sense of stress with the situation that you're in? Because we were thinking about it, this is the response to emotional pressure. So can you change that emotional pressure? Suffered for a prolonged period of time. So can you limit the time? And where you feel like you have little or no control. So can you take back control of any piece of the stressful situation? Sometimes we are in a situation where things are changeable. Sometimes it's just the system that we're operating in. So I'll mention a book at the very end that some of this talk is based on. It's called Burnout. And it talks about, in that specific book, it talks about the patriarchy being a system that we're all functioning in that leads to a lot of chronic stress and burnout, especially for women, but also for men. And if you read that book and the patriarchy just doesn't sit quite right with you as a underlying system, you can just say the system in general. So for me, it might be the healthcare system, or if you are in education, maybe it's the education system. The systems are set up in a way, and they've been developed in a way over time that individuals often have very little control. And I think probably most people can understand how it would feel working in a system where you have little individual control. And I don't know what everybody does for a profession, but I don't feel like this is too much of a stretch to think about the system causing stress itself and burnout itself. So some work systems just set us up for chronic stress and burnout by the hours that they require, or the paperwork they require, or the fact that you don't get to, you have to do standardized testing that makes you feel like you don't have control over what you're doing. Also, systemic biases set up certain people to face more chronic stress and burnout. So systemic racism, sexism, ableism, all of the isms that we know are circulating out there may set you up for more chronic stress and burnout, even if you're in the exact same situation as the person sitting right next to you, because you're getting those different kinds of pressures from the system. And then our personal life situations may put us in a position where we cannot change the level of stress or burnout we face. So if we're in that situation where we have to work this job because there's no other options financially for our family, or I know that I need to move, but I can't move yet because my elderly mother lives with us and we just have to make it through because she's not able to be on her own, or things like that. So we may be in these situations. If you can remove those stressors, that's obviously the first thing that we should be looking at, right? We shouldn't be just suffering through stress because that's the way it is. We should be looking at, what do I have control over? What can I change? But if you continue to be in the situation where there is that chronic stress, how can we break the cycle? So the things that I hear about frequently that people do to kind of handle their stress, which is not generally actually handling it, it's usually more numbing it. So many people have emotional eating habits related to stress. So this might be, I learned this very questionable skill in med school and residency. When I would have a hard day or I was on call and it was busy, I would say, I deserve a cookie after the day that I just had. So then I would, get to the habit where on a hard day, I would say, I should have some chocolate because I'm having a hard day, or I'm going to have some cupcakes or these brownies or things like that. And it helps temporarily. So all of these things help temporarily, but it doesn't actually get at what the cause of the stress is and get to the point where you can actually feel better over time. So similarly, alcohol will kind of, it'll take some of your, it'll kind of hopefully in most cases decrease the amount you care about it. Some people will get more anxious the more alcohol they drink, and it gets to be this vicious cycle. But it's very common for people to get home and say, I need a glass of wine after the day that I had. So very, very common to hear that, and again, helps maybe temporarily, but doesn't necessarily get at the root causes. Venting is another thing that I think a lot of people will do. I do it sometimes without even noticing it, where I had a just terrible situation with somebody at work, and I get home and I just spew it out at either my husband or a friend or things like that. And sometimes I think with venting, we're looking for maybe validation for how we felt in the situation, but it actually, if you think of that acute stress, chronic stress model, it's actually keeping that threat in a really prominent place, and doesn't actually, it actually makes you relive that threat and may contribute to more chronic stress over time. And then many people numb with social media. Some people will just distract themselves with, tasks at home or staying busy. Or many people will just give and give and give because, the more stress they have, the harder they work, and then they get to the point of burnout. So these are obviously not very healthy ways to break the cycle, and probably lead to just more covering up the chronic stress that's still there throughout all of this. So if we can't remove the stressor, and we want to actually improve our body's chronic stress response, so if we want to actually prevent that chronic stress response, we can respond as if the chronic stress is acute stress. So we can actually do some of the things that help to relieve that acute stress response and get you back to normal. So if you think about running away from the lion, we are fleeing, or say we turn around and decide to fight or battle. The threat needs to be removed, and we need to have safety and security. So here's some examples of that. So if we think about the fight response, so think you have chronic stress, you have a work situation that you have no control over, and it's making you feel like you're under that stress all of the time. You can actually help to get rid of some of those acute stress hormones by using the muscles that you would normally use with fighting. So that might be kickboxing or weightlifting, or using a punching bag, or even screaming. So, people will go out like a guttural yell. Will actually use some of those muscles and signal to your body that this is on its way out. This is something acute, and it's going to go away. Crying, like a sobbing kind of cry, will sometimes get this as well. Stomping your feet or squeezing your hands really tight or crying, this is all things that some people, I think, feel like they need to just punch something, and that is actually a good way to signal to your body that you need to get these hormones out, get these chemicals out. To simulate fleeing, any exercise that gets your heart rate up. So that would be running or a fast walk, swimming, biking, running up and down the stairs at work. A really intense yoga class might get you this. And that's really, again, just trying to simulate to your body that you are doing the thing to get away from the threat or fight the threat. And it teaches your body, okay, this paperwork on my desk, that's not stressful. I don't need you to raise your blood pressure with that. But when I'm running, I need you to raise that blood pressure. And then when I go back to my desk, as I sit down, it should, your blood pressure should then go back down. So you have to kind of retrain your body with the exercise that way. Removal of the threat is very important. So this might be setting some boundaries so that you are leaving your phone at home when you are going for a walk, or out with your kids, turning off your email. Spending time outside in nature is naturally and evolutionarily proven to help humans deal with chronic stress. So a walk, if you can go for a walk on a trail in the woods, that actually will do more for your stress level than if you are walking on a treadmill at the gym. And then a return to safety or security. So this is spending time with friends, and that's not spending time with friends where you're venting about the day that you had. You're spending times with friends where you're laughing and you're maybe chatting about other things that are going on in life, and really feeling that sense of safety and security, not reliving the threat that was causing so many problems. Having some family time, time for self-care. And unfortunately, I think in our society, we jump right to this self-care as the big thing we need to do. And it's good to do that, but if we're not doing these other things, it's just kind of a Band-Aid. So, you know, when people say the solution for chronic stress is you need to take a yoga class, or have a massage, or you know, take some time for yourself where you're just sitting by yourself. Those are all very important things, but on their own, they're not going to get you to be able to break the cycle. Counseling can be very, very important for some people who are under this chronic stress and have never dealt with it before. So if you truly have never dealt with your stress level, have never reflected on what's causing your stress, why are you feeling this way, what are the things that make you feel better, you probably will need some counseling and thought work to get to the point where you feel safe and secure, especially if you have significant problems with coworkers that maybe had incivility or disrespect, or certainly any physical threat to safety. You're probably going to need some professional help to get back to that feeling of safety and security. Making art can be something that makes people feel safe and secure. So that could be singing or painting, or drawing, or if you're a cook, maybe making a elaborate meal. Those kinds of things get that sense of normal back for a lot of people, and so that can be a really helpful way to get to that safety and security piece. So maybe I'll take a pause here and see if anybody has any questions. I was going to do a case example, but if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them or clarify things. I'm watching the chat. Or Jody, if you have any questions that I'll bring up, brought up. Okay, maybe I'll just keep going here. I assume you can all hear me, right? Okay.
Hear you. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat as well.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I'll do this case. So this is Samantha, and she's an amalgamation of a couple of people. So she's not any one person, but I think it's something that many people can probably identify with. So as a year ago, when the pandemic hit, Samantha was working a night shift job and some gig jobs to support her family. She had to leave her job due to the kids needing support for virtual learning. I don't know if anybody can identify with that, but I know, you know, there's a lot of women in this situation. She has special needs kids and foster kids. She has some pretty significant relationship stress that has been an up and down kind of roller coaster for the last several years. And obviously, as many people were noting when the pandemic hit, all those relationship stressors were just magnified. So her relationship stress was getting pretty intense, and then she had a death in the family as well. So at that time, she was feeling pretty overwhelmed. She was feeling hopeless. She's not able to really escape any of this situation. You know, all of a sudden, people were just forced to, not only did she have to leave her job, but she has to be home with her kids at all times, basically. So she noticed that her blood pressure was elevated. When she went in for a doctor's visit, she was gaining weight, even though she hadn't changed anything with her nutrition. Her blood sugar was high. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't focus. And she was just kind of got to a breaking point, honestly. And so at that time, it would be helpful to kind of think through those questions. Can the situation be changed? Well, not really. I mean, there's not a whole lot that she had control over at that time. Can you limit the time you're exposed to the situation? Not really. Only thing would be is taking back control of any piece of the stressful situation, maybe in the context of that relationship stress, if there was something that that was able to give her a little bit of space from that, that would be potentially some place that she could make some impact. So then you think through, okay, there's not much that's changeable. This is going to be her situation for a little while. What might help her weather this period? And for her, what ended up helping, so number one was counseling, because some of the situations that she was in with, the relationship stress, and then with the situation with her foster children, it really needed some pretty deep dives to try to get at some of the emotions that were surrounding it and some of the behaviors that were resulting. Exercise might be something that would help her channel that chronic stress and kind of teach her body how to manage stress. Time with friends and family. And for her, she was getting a lot of time with her kids and with her partner where there's that relationship stress, but wasn't able to spend a whole lot of time with friends or family because of the pandemic. So that was something that was a struggle to get there. But when she was able to see friends or family, that was something that gave her that feeling of safety. And then some time away from the stressors. So, if you are stuck inside your house with your kids who are virtual learning, and you're stuck inside with your partner and things are not going well through relationship, it's hard to imagine any of that getting better without having some sort of break. And so for her, it might, she might have been able to find a way to do this with just leaving the house on her own and going for a walk, or scheduling some time where she could go do something just on her own. But for her, actually, she ended up having to leave town for a couple of days. So she, it got to the breaking point where she said, I can't do this. I need a couple of days. And she went and stayed with a friend a couple of hours away. So, so she started seeing a counselor. She ended up separating from her partner and ultimately got divorced, which in the short term was didn't help her chronic stress levels, but it was something where for her, the writing was on the wall, and the counselor helped her see that path forward. As a result of this separation, she had shared custody, which allowed her to have a little bit of a break. So she had some days where she did just have herself to worry about, and was able to start focusing on things like exercise, using a tracking app to work on some eating habits that she had noticed starting to crop up, a new apartment, which was a new space where she didn't have that connection to that that stressful life experience that she had, and was able to have the space to think about finding a new job, and was able to, instead of getting a shift work or a gig job, which she had previously been just kind of filling in with, she was able to find a new stable job in her chosen field that then gave her that feeling of stability and safety that she hadn't had for quite some time. So she's now feeling, a year later, after weathering a pandemic and all those stresses, she now feels in control of her life. Her blood pressure's improved, she is losing weight, and she's sleeping well. And so this obviously is a fairly extreme example. And, I don't know if it's helpful for people to think of other specific examples where people could, take that space and do something physically to release that stress, and then find that safety and security. But that's the breakdown, is how can you release those hormones that are driving up that acute stress response? How can you separate yourself from that stressful situation that you're in? And then ultimately, how can you return yourself to that feeling of safety and security so that your body recognizes that stress is gone? Any questions about that? I'll click ahead. I can't remember what my next slide is. Yeah. So again, to break the cycle, we are, if possible, we're going to change the situation, limit the time you're exposed to the situation, and take control of any piece of it that you can take control of. And that's going back to this, knowing that chronic stress is the response to emotional pressure suffered for a prolonged period of time in which an individual feels they have little or no control. If that's not possible, if it's not possible to change anything, it's out of your control, it's something that you have no power with, then you are going to try to trick your body into thinking that those chronic stressors are acute stressors. So you're going to do fight or flight type activities. You're going to find ways to remove the threat so that you're not, so that you're able to feel that separation. And then you're going to seek safety and security. This is the book that some of these things came from. And again, they do mention the patriarchy as a big piece of that, but if you have trouble latching onto that, you can certainly substitute the system and think through kind of how the system might set you up for burnout and how you can avoid that burnout then. So this is my family. These are my 3 kids and my husband. And then this is a picture of me getting my, or holding the vial that contained my COVID-19 vaccine on Christmas Eve this last year. And, you know, in the midst of all of everything that people were going through at that time, and, you know, an incredibly stressful time for everybody in the healthcare and education system and just really everybody in the world, I was still able to see that good things were coming, and seeing that, you know, light, and seeing that this was going to be a limited time that we were in that situation, helped keep me from getting burned out during that time. So this was in December. However, the cold weather and the winter, the gray, look at this gray sky, so gray and brown and cold and dark for so long. I and a lot of other people hit February, and even though we could see that things were getting better, we hit some periods of just feeling overwhelmed, starting to feel some burnout. And it took some very concerted efforts at trying to spend that time with friends and family, giving myself that space where I, you know, turned off notifications of all the COVID results that were coming in, and you know, found some time where I was really just focusing on myself and trying not to solve all the problems in the world, which that's kind of how it felt for a while. And so now, you know, the weather's nicer, we're outside more, we're walking a little bit more, and now can feel that weight lifted. And I think if we, you know, if we had continued with that feeling of overwhelm, there would have been, without knowing some of these things of how to get through it, it would have been, even though things are hopeful, things would have still looked pretty unhopeful and looked like there was not a way forward. So just even though I'm somebody who thinks about this kind of thing a lot, I still got into a pretty, you know, pretty low spot at the end of winter, like a lot of people, I think, in this area. And it was just kind of an accumulation of that year, this really hard year that we had all been in, and just kind of being gentle with ourselves and recognizing when that was happening was really important. Okay, any questions? I don't see any in the chat yet. Yeah, so I see a question about the hypervigilance that comes for people in law enforcement. And so I have a couple of, I have certainly many patients who are in law enforcement, and the exercise is probably the most important thing. And I think sometimes people kind of overthink the exercise. It really actually helps to do it in small bursts and doesn't have to be like a big full workout. It really is just enough to get your heart rate going. It actually helps to retrain the body to not be in that hypervigilant state quite as much. Meditation is another way to do that, but I would say without the exercise, you're not going to quite be able, the meditation is going to be very difficult for people because their brain is just constantly working on what's the next threat that's coming down the road. The other thing is when they are off duty, so when they're not working, really making sure that they're having those times where they feel safe and secure. And when they're having those times, really kind of noticing those times of I'm safe and everybody around me is safe, and we're, you know, sitting out here camping or sitting around a campfire and nothing is going to come in and harm us, and then really just kind of noticing those times when they're feeling safe, because that helps to counteract a little bit when they're feeling hypervigilant. The vigilance is not a bad thing. So, you know, all of these reactions are protective when we see it in small times of our life. So if we are, you know, if we didn't have anxiety and vigilance and things like that, we or our loved ones would come to harm. So it's a very important piece of our evolution that we have that feeling of anxiety, feeling of vigilance. But it's when it's kind of overwhelming, or when it's getting to the point where it's making you feel like you are never safe, that it's really a problem. So it's kind of having to retrain the body and the brain to believe that there's that safety, even though law enforcement officers have been trained to see the threat everywhere. You have to see the safety everywhere as well. But the exercise in short bursts is probably the like most concrete thing to help have people work on. So that might be, you know, if they just had a interaction with somebody that got their adrenaline going, but there wasn't any fight or flight kind of thing that they were able to do. So say it's an argument and they think it might escalate and then it doesn't actually escalate. You need to train the body to come back down to normal. And the only way to do that is to activate those muscles that would have been used with that fight or flight. Okay, any other questions? All right, Jody, do you have anything?
No, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It was really informative. I think we had the top number I saw there was 37 people watching your presentation. So that's awesome. And it seemed like your audience was really focused because they were like, great content, lots of positive comments in the chat. So we appreciate your time today and your effort for putting all of this awesome information into the presentation. I know we have about 1 minute before the break is scheduled to start. So there's a break from 1:45 until 2, and then there's another main event back on the main stage at 2 o'clock. So thank you, Dr. Fox, for your time.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. And if there's any, that Burnout book, I don't know if I can share my slides to you, Jody, if that is helpful for people.
Yeah.
Or I think the session was recorded.
It is
too,
recorded,
right?
Yep. So it'll be archived on the website as well.
Yeah, so that Burnout book is really great. And somebody mentioned in the chat that it's on Audible too. I know one of, I had heard from somebody who listened to it on Audible. And so it is really, I think, useful for people who are thinking about how they can keep themselves from getting into the level of burnout and really try to manage the stress as much as they can.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that resource too.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.